frustrating about this set of assumptions this teacher apparently espouses is that it flies in the face of innovation, it flies in the face of creativity and achievement. Corporate America retakes continuously. Innovation and creativity and achievement is always born of failure.
Hi, I'm Mark Barnes, and this is another episode of the Hack Learning Podcast. And today we're hacking the message. What message do educators and adults send to kids, whether intended or unintended, that can impact learning? And in the open, you heard from experienced Missouri teacher Jay Thompson. And Jay is talking about iteration for learning and innovation and creativity and failure. He suggested in corporate America, we use failure to help us get better. Failure helps us innovate. It helps us create. And we embrace that. But in school, we often don't. And this idea comes from a sign that was posted on social media from a teacher. So it's the end of a grading period, and the teacher posts a sign which the teacher felt it was okay to then share on social media, sort of saying, hey, look what I did. And the sign at the end of the grading period in huge letters at the top says, no, you cannot do extra credit to bring up your grade. And we'll post this sign on our show notes, which you can find at hacklearning.org. And there's an incredible conversation about this sign that then happens on social media. I shared the sign out to get people's opinion. And of course, I said I didn't like the sign. Okay, people who listen to the show know that I tend to be on the more progressive side of education and the side that really is in favor of helping kids in any way we can. And a lot of inspiring discussion came from this. And there were some people on both sides. Okay, so there's a couple of layers to this onion. So first of all, there's this idea that a teacher posts this sign that is sort of in kids' face that says, hey, you didn't get the job done in the first place. You know, you didn't do your work, and that's why you're coming to me for extra credit. Or you don't have the kind of grade you want and you want extra credit. But it's not really what the sign's about. The sign goes on to say, do us both a favor. Remember how disappointed and upset you feel right now. Take a moment and really let it sink in. Every time you fail to turn in an assignment in the new grading period, think of how you feel right now and know that if you continue to make the decisions that have led you to this moment, you will be facing down this sign again in 9 weeks. And there's a question. What can you do to bring your grade up? And here's the answer. Maybe you should start with your work when it's assigned. So again, going back to the open, Jay Thompson looks at this as a case where a student wants to do work, wants to do more. And we don't know in every case, is it because something wasn't done, or is it because there was a poor grade that has lowered a grade for the student, and the student wants to bring that grade up? And this is a whole different issue. We've talked about hacking assessment. We've actually done it twice in earlier episodes, and I'm sure we'll do it again. Also, there are other issues. So I posted this on my social networks, and there's a stimulating conversation. We'll share a lot of this in the show notes at hacklearning.org, too. Just check out our podcast page. And let's go over some of these. Okay, so these are from educators, parents, people in the private sector. Maria says to the sign, her response is, I wonder about grading practices. Is the grading based on what should be formative and not summative? And again, we've talked about this in prior episodes. Check out Hacking Assessment. I also am saddened when teachers take this tone with students. So there's an idea of what's going on in the classroom. Are students engaged? Do they want to do the work? If they don't do the work, is there an opportunity which there appears not to be? And this whole idea of the tone. Another educator, Dorothy, says, I'd actually rather give extra credit and remotivate a student who was panicked or feeling discouraged than just mash him into the ground. what good does that do anyone? So, a lot of people went to the other side of what Dorothy says. And they said, well, this is about responsibility. This person is teaching kids that you have to be responsible. In fact, an author and educator, Don Wettrick, joins this conversation. And he says, I see both sides. On one hand, you have the student's perspective, not doing work due to lack of relevancy or whatever reason the students gave. And maybe it's I didn't like this assignment. Maybe something happened at home and I couldn't get it done. And now I'm going to be punished with a grade, and I need the extra credit to bring that grade up. But Don says, I've had several instances where I and many other teachers bent over backwards, providing opportunity after opportunity for the student, and it went by unappreciated until grade time. And then suddenly the alarm goes off and they want to get this extra credit to bring up the grade. So there's two problems. Okay, maybe they're not engaged in the work. Maybe there's issues. Maybe, this is possible, maybe the student's just lazy and doesn't do what needs to be done. And then suddenly it's grade time. And again, I think it goes back to a different issue about grading and the value of that. Or if assignments are not valuable, what can we do about that? And remember, we did hacking the worksheet. You can check that out at hacklearning.org. And we talked about engaging learners. But let's go back to the tone of the sign. So there's a lot of interesting discussion about the philosophy in the classroom. Should we allow this extra work? As Jay Thompson says, should we be like corporate America and say, we're okay with failure because you're going to go back to the drawing board and you're going to innovate and you're going to create and you're going to come back eventually and you're going to create something better. And this leads to mastery. So also, though, let's think about just the tone of the sign. So Sarah says, and again, we can see a lot of this on the show notes page, I don't think the tone of this sign is appropriate, but I understand and appreciate the sentiment. Now, this led to a different take. A lot of people said, I hear frustration. And I think Don Wettrick said it. I hear some frustration from the teacher who wants students to do well. And I think all teachers want kids to do well. And we're working very hard to provide activities and that will help them learn, that will lead to certain skills and concepts and objectives, standards even. And when kids aren't doing the work, we get frustrated. So some people said, well, I think that the student or the teacher is frustrated, and that's what I see in that. And then that sort of led back to people saying, well, yeah, but if you're an adult and you sit down and you take the time to create a sign, now this becomes sort of a premeditated thing. It's not just frustration. It's you thinking, I'm going to put this out there. And is it a gotcha thing? Is it now the teacher saying, I'll show these kids? And, that tone again. Is the tone something we want in our classrooms? And again, let's listen to what Jay Thompson says.
And as for the sign's message, it might very well be that its intent may be worthy. That is to say, to teach responsibility, and that's all well and good. But its tone, its sarcasm, its incendiary, its inflammatory, its vindictiveness, that's objectionable, man. None of us should be abdicating the responsibility of motivating students at the expense of their psychological well-being and to deflate them. It seems to me this teacher may have gotten it all backwards as regards their responsibility to students.
So we can hear the passion in Jay's voice for sure. And a lot of educators, those I spoke to and those who actually typed messages on Facebook or Twitter or somewhere else, they had passion in their own message about this. And we're hacking the message today. So we're getting a lot of different opinions from educators, but I think the overriding opinion that I see in all of this is that most people, even those who say we have to teach responsibility, Jay Thompson says, I can get the idea behind it, that I want to teach responsibility. But even if we're doing that, don't we have to be careful about the tone of the message? We just did Hacking the Shout, which again, you can find at hacklearning.org on our podcast page. And in there we talked about how yelling and shouting at kids is counterproductive. So is this tone in this message that an educator gives just like yelling? It certainly comes across that way. Someone else on the Facebook feed said that he saw this and asked his students about it, shared it with his students, and you'll be able to see the sign in the show notes, shared it with them and said, and kind of polled the audience, what's your reaction? And he said that the kids said things like, it's mean, it's rude, it's disrespectful, that it's uncaring, it's unfeeling. Is this the message that we want to send to kids? So we have to hack the message. And this is something that probably takes a lot more writing and a lot more podcast episodes to truly get it right. But we need to make the effort. So for me, the first step in hacking this message is pause and plan. And I said this, I believe, in Hacking the Shout. I think it's one of the most important strategies that we teach kids, but that adults often don't get themselves. Before I take action, I need to pause and I need to think about it. I need to reflect. Maybe we should say pause and reflect before we plan. Pause, reflect, then plan. So now I want to say, what am I doing? What message am I sending to my kids? If the person who created this sign wants to convey a message that I need you to do the work when I assign it, and I'm not going to give extra credit, this should be something that's communicated up front. And a lot of teachers in this conversation said that. They said, we need to look at what's going on before the end of a grading period. Why do we get to the point where the students are asking for extra credit? If we solve that issue early and we deal with it throughout a marking period, we won't have kids asking for extra credit. And that's a really, really important point. So we need to say, what is my message? What do I want kids to get? And how can I convey that? I think another step is to continue the conversation daily throughout a marking period and throughout a school year. And not just one about assignments or extra credit or grades, but everything that's important. Appropriate use with technology. Technology comes up so often. And I hear people saying, my kids don't get it and they do things they shouldn't do. And I say, how often do you talk about it? Because it's not a message that kids get one time. We need to say it over and over and over. So I think there's a couple of quick fixes. One, let's pause as adults and say, what's our message and how is the best way to convey that message without hurting kids, without getting them to be reluctant learners. We want to inspire them to be independent learners. That's the real message that we want to send. We continue this conversation at #HackLearning on our Facebook page and at hacklearning.org. Check out our podcast there. Look at the sign. Look at comments from other educators. And please join that conversation either on Twitter, Facebook, or on the hacklearning.org page. And as always, if you want more in-depth hack learning, check out our books at hacklearningbooks.com. See you next time.